And just like that, it's 6:03 on the great Fox Sports Radio, Fox Sports 1230, and we welcome you. It's another edition, a Monday after the Super Bowl edition of the Green Light Special on the aforementioned 1230 on the AM radio dial. Always, of course, available is Fox Sports Toledo on the iHeartRadio app. More outlets, more platforms, more ways to give you the show coming. Big thanks to Frank for that. Russell as well, Dar as well, Jake Woods, he too, as we get you the crew together to get you another edition of the Green Light Special, your 60 minutes of Toledo sports talk. And we have a lot to unpack here on this 8th day of February after a very dull Super Bowl. Far from a classic. In fact, it made Belichick-McVay look like a classic. Did yesterday's 31-9 thumping Buccaneers over the Chiefs. As we get you set up with the heavy football discussion here on Fox 1230. No football for the next 28 weeks or so. That's assuming we get ourselves a preseason in August. But the conversation, of course, just getting started as we chat. I'll tell you what, despite the Super Bowl being lousy, this Sunday as a whole, from a sports standpoint, wonderful. You want to talk about a perfect build-up to Super Bowl 55. Perfect for me, at least. That it was, as far as the basketball, a little Big Ten. Dip your toes into a little Sun Celtics. You had the NHL NBC Game of the Week at 12. That was the Flyers and the Capitals in a 7-4 game. Good to you if you had the goals versus the touchdowns as far as the cross-sport prop. That won by a mile as far as 11 goals to 4 touchdowns against Super Bowl 55. Speaking of the hockey, you had the Red Wings playing at 2. They snapped an 8-game skid. Really happy to see Giovanni Smith, who had the Gordie Howe hat trick. He is coming along as a future mainstay on that Red Wing roster. One of the young guns coming up, starting to blossom, is Giovanni Smith. So you had that. You had Koepka eagling the 17th in Phoenix to win there. You had a little pregame here, a little pregame there. You had a little Al Davis 30 for 30 in my case, which I thought was a little tacky but good. And you had some more pregame, and then boom, 6:30 was there. And 2 minutes and 20 seconds later, the anthem was concluded, and Tom Brady wins Super Bowl number 7. Scotty Miller, Bowling Green product, wins Super Bowl number 1. And there's a lot of takeaways I got to get to. In fact, I want to get to 3 here in the opening monologue about what was just an awful Super Bowl 55. And point number 1 is probably the most important when you're talking about the game last night. The game was a joke. I mean, all things considered, the game was an absolute joke. Whether it's the halftime performance, which looked like a complete lip sync to me, and good for Weekend for putting $7 million of his own money to put in his mind, the best show possible. But when you're looking at these shows over the years, when you're looking at Springsteen, when you're looking at McCartney, when you're looking at U2, and I'm not even talking about just the classic rock. I mean, but some of these shows, they're awful. I mean, that's just all there is to it. They're absolutely awful for my liking. The commercials are no better. Okay, Travolta here. Okay, there's George Costanza with the old ringtone. Okay, there's Peyton Manning in a cowboy hat. But there's Koepka at the pizza party. But, with how many commercials there are, 90% of them are trash. I mean, they're just no good. And I feel like I've been saying that for years now. This isn't new. The commercials are just incredibly overrated. The halftime performance, astutely pointed out by Anthony Bellino on Twitter, I might add. Hey, I bring up the arguments with Bellino on Twitter. Let's give him a little golf clap. He's on this too, not only with the commentary aspect, but this as well. As far as these halftime shows, as far as the commercials, overrated. So that was lousy. Again, the commentary with the broadcasters, with not so much Nance but Romo. Shame on both of them for missing key points as broadcasters, whether it's dissecting the offensive line better, whether it's bringing up the fact that Reed's son may have killed a 5-year-old in a car accident. They don't even bring it up. Does it not have an impact on the game, guys? I would think so. I would think 3 days before a Super Bowl, when the team is on the road, when that happens, after drinking has been involved, that would be at least something to bring up on the air. Romo chooses not to. Nance chose not to. And then Romo, and we'll get to him later, but Romo, that was Romo's worst performance as a professional broadcaster. And we've been killing the guy for years. And that was the worst. That was the most intolerable performance. And, of course, you get it on Super Bowl 55. So you got nothing out of the broadcast booth last night, which really, for CBS, you could say look at the ratings. You could say look at the salary and look at the paychecks. I can assure you after last night, CBS heads were spinning. And we will explain, and we will give you a multitude of examples about Romo. Bellino hit that right on the head as well. So you take the halftime show, you take all these commercials, which are so overrated, you take the dreadful commentary. What else you need? How about some good officiating? Didn't get that. I mean, the calls that were made, fortunately, didn't decide the game. because Kansas City didn't have a chance. More on that in a smidge. But the calls in that first half, I mean, you were calling, Evans pushed off call on Kansas City. Matthew gets called, and Matthew ran his mouth way too much last night. And then he got burned. If you notice, Brady attacked Matthew after they started jawing at each other. After Matthew got the lousy flags thrown on him, Brady got the best of Matthew after that sequence. But those calls, it was a bad night for the league. I mean, you cannot have a Super Bowl 55 have those calls. I mean, those, I got tweets coming in, suspect. You're calling those suspect calls. 2 of them were atrocious. The one ball was uncatchable. And the one flag that they threw in the end zone on Matthew, the second penalty on Matthew, it was a penalty, but they don't even get the call right because it wasn't pass interference. The ball not only had not left the hand, but the ball was way out of, you couldn't catch that ball. No one could catch it. Randy Moss couldn't catch that ball in his prime. That ball was way gone. So the fact that they call pass interference on Matthew, I believe was on Evans. Evans wasn't getting that ball. You could have went illegal contact there, but you can't go pass interference. That was just a horrendous sequence for the officials. So you have the bad officiating, you have the awful commentary. So all of that's a joke, and then as a viewer, you're just left sitting there hoping that you get a game that you can watch and put a little credibility into and see a good battle and be into it for 3.5, 4 quarters, and you got everything but. The game was a joke too. In the trenches, when you look at the point of attack, when you look at that Kansas City line versus Todd Bowles, who we'll get to, and he deserves a ton of credit. He got the game ball again yesterday, so it's not about taking credit away from Bowles. But when you look at the Chief offensive line, after you have the left tackle, who's not great. Fisher's not Fisher's not an all-pro player. But damn it, Fisher's a good left tackle. They're familiar. He's been there since he's been drafted number 1 overall out of Central. They know Fisher. Fisher knows Mahomes. Losing Eric Fisher to the blown Achilles in Green Bay was huge. Not having Mitchell Schwartz, who's one of the best, if not the best, right tackle in all of football, losing him to the back and not getting him back in the lineup due to that injury, terrible. And now the Kansas City Chiefs were forced to put the starting right guard at left tackle. That was a disaster. You have the right guard sliding the tackle. Wiley can't play tackle. 2 completely different positions. Andrew Wiley cannot play tackle. And that just told you how big of a joke it was as far as it wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't a fair fight when you talk about the Chiefs rotating these guys everywhere to positions that they're not accustomed to playing the week of the Super Bowl, week and a half before the Super Bowl. And then they got to fill the extra spot by bringing in the center off the bench who they had sat down weeks ago, who stinks. And that entire offensive line got bulldozed over. And when you factor in you're going against a Wizard and Bulls with those type of players and that type of speed at the linebacker position and those Bulls up front and Sue and Villa, look, no chance. No chance. And although we didn't gauge it as such going into the game, it didn't take you long while watching Mahomes was pressured 52% of the snaps. 52% of the snaps, Mahomes was pressured. And Mahomes really had no prayer. And when he did have a prayer, the receivers dropped the football like Pringle did on the acrobatic play by Mahomes when he was basically parallel to the ground after getting tripped up and threw the ball 30 yards in the air. Some of the incompletions thrown by Mahomes were some of the more impressive incompletions you've ever seen. That's how impressive and that's how much, and this was not on Mahomes at all. This had everything to do with the offensive line play. Kansas City had no options, and you could say, well, you need your depth to win a Super Bowl. I could say Kansas City had a really good offensive line 2 weeks ago, and that offensive line was the worst performance from a line in Super Bowl history, and it wasn't a fair fight, and they had nobody to go to, and COVID played a role too. If you're wondering where the young depth is on the offensive line as backups, and if you're wondering, well, why not invest in depth at the offensive line position in the past, they have. And they sat out due to the COVID season. So the whole thing was a mess in the end for the Kansas City Chiefs. And although you can't take anything away from Todd Bowles and the defensive unit, you're not going to say Brady doesn't have 7 rings because it's a COVID year. You're not going to do that. But there was a little credibility taken away from this game, no? And you add in the bad commentary from Romo and Nance. And you add in the halftime show and these commercials that everyone gets way too worked up about. You throw in some of these calls in the first half, which fortunately did not decide the game. Those calls did not decide the game. At the end of the day, the score was closer than the game really was. But you look at that Matthew interception, it should have been a pick. You look at the Matthew pass interference, it should have been no such thing. You look at the Matthew illegal contact, well, it was called pass interference when it wasn't pass interference. These refs didn't have a clue. So you add in the officiating, you add in the Romo stuff, and then you look at this Kansas City offensive line, and the game wasn't competitive really after the first quarter. Really, after Gronkowski put in the first of his 2 touchdowns to give Tampa Bay that lead, which shifted a lot of money in Vegas, by the way, on that second to last play in the first quarter. After that, it wasn't competitive. After that, Mahomes had nowhere to go. You could say Andy Reid and Bieniemy could have done a better job adjusting. Sure, but they didn't have a prayer. You're probably not going to be able to convince me that adjustments by Reid and or Bieniemy would have saved the day for Kansas City. You can't. Not after watching that offensive line. That was the worst. I mean, forget Super Bowl. I've been watching the Jets offensive line for years now. This Jets offensive line has been historically bad. I watch every game. I sit down and watch every game. That was the worst offensive line performance I've seen in my life. And it's not even close. And we're not even narrowing it down to the Super Bowl footage I've seen. We're narrowing it down to every game. Every professional football game I've watched has featured an offensive line performance better than that. That was brutal. Chiefs didn't have a chance to win the game, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, COVID and injuries had an impact on the credibility of the game. I'm not going to take that too far. The Buccaneers won the Super Bowl. What was the NFL going to do? Not play the game? Not play the games this year? Just wrap up the season? They played the season. You knew it was going to hurt the credibility a little bit. You knew it was going to come down to who gets a good bounce here and a bad bounce there when it comes to the contact tracing. And fortunately, you had a disastrous situation with the Browns and the Steelers. And fortunately, the better team won that football game. So it didn't matter that Stefanski was watching it from his basement. But you know where I'm going at with this. I mean, the Chiefs should have had an offensive line last night. And if you want to say injuries happen, well, they do. But damn it, they should have had a replacement. And they didn't because of COVID. So you add in the blown Achilles. The entire thing was an absolute mess for Kansas City. And at the end of the day, you could talk about the Bieniemy Reid stuff. And look, I don't think Reid had a good day at the office, whether or not it's at the end of the first half. I think adjustments could have been made. You could have seen some more screens, more quick passes. They could have, look, maybe it was more about plays and not players for Andy Reid when it should have been the opposite. I'll buy that. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't have mattered. Because I think the Chiefs needed Schwartz in there. I think they needed Fisher, the left tackle, in there. And at the very least, they needed an option, a legitimate option to put in there, such as the kid that they drafted. The name escapes me. 3rd-round pick, last draft, COVID opt-out. That kid would have been used last night. Because as you saw, Andrew Wiley at right tackle, God bless him, not a good guard, even worse tackle. Even worse. So look, the game was a joke. I'm sorry. You look at the score, you look at the level of competitiveness, you look at the halftime show, the commercials, Romo, the bad calls. It was a joke of a sporting event. Considering the circumstances, right? Considering the expectations, considering the build-up, joke of a sporting event. Complete joke. Item number 2, back to Todd Bowles. He feasted. Everything I just mentioned to you, everything that was brought upon the Chiefs and the circumstances that arose, whether or not it was the COVID, having no players because of COVID, injury, the circumstances with Britt Reid, the son of Andy Reid, who we mentioned before, which was not mentioned by the broadcast. I don't know how, but, he may have killed a 5-year-old 3 days before the Super Bowl because of possibly drinking. Possibly. And he wasn't there, and the investigation is ongoing. They don't bring it up in the Super Bowl. Look, I think that could have been a small factor. Obviously, the COVID and the injuries ultimately ended up being a big factor for the Chiefs, and I think it decided the game. But Todd Bowles, you can't take away the credit. Todd Bowles, after winning the game in New Orleans, Brady didn't, Bowles did. After winning the game in Green Bay, Brady didn't, Bowles did. 3 picks in the second half, rating under, Bowles won that game. And Bowles won the Super Bowl. And that's where I'm not going to, and I've been hard on Bowles, Jet fan. You're not going to find too many Jet fans out there that are rooting for Todd Bowles to succeed because he was a horrendous head coach. And he wasn't ready to be a head coach, in fairness. He wasn't ready. Not with that GM, not with that roster, and he couldn't manage a game. I mean, where do you want me to go? The punts against Cincinnati, opening day of 17. Punting down 2 scores midfield at Pittsburgh late in the 4th. Where do you want me to go? Guy couldn't manage a game. Could that change down the road? It could. Because now what we're seeing out of Todd Bowles is he knows plays, he knows players, he knows situation, and what we saw last night, despite the circumstances, which was lousy, and despite a little bit of a fluky game, it was. I thought the credibility was hurt. I thought it was a little fluky, but you can take nothing away from Todd Bowles, who made Reed and Bieniemy look like amateurs. And I consider Todd Bowles, even at the beginning of the season, even at the midway point of the year where it looked like the Buccaneer defense, sitting at 7-5, giving up 1 million points, drilled by New Orleans, drilled by the Rams, I thought the defense was overrated at one point. I always still considered Todd Bowles a really good DC. Guys, Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. Yesterday, considering the circumstances at hand for both teams, Todd Bowles recognized the players that he had, headlined by the trains up front in Sue and Villa, and really probably even more so headlined by the backs, the linebackers, and White and David. And Tom Brady got the MVP. I thought you could have given that Super Bowl MVP. If the Super Bowl MVP wasn't a quarterback award, and that's exactly what it is, it takes a miserable performance from a quarterback for a non-QB to win that award. You could have given it to Gronkowski. I would have given it to Devin White. Devin White was the best player on that football field, I thought, for more than 3 quarters. Doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but I thought he was the best player on the field. And again, with the aforementioned Sue, with the aforementioned Villa, with that weak offensive line, with a bunch of nobodies for Kansas City, that was a ferocious pass rush. Todd Bowles, if I went back and rewatched the game, which I have not done, if I went back and rewatched it, I'd probably count 10 plays or less where Bowles blitzed. Is he going to drop 8? You don't know. Is he going to drop 4? You have no idea. Could he drop 3? We'll see. The confusion, you could see it in Reed, you could see it in Bieniemy, you could see it in Mahomes. And the offensive line wasn't necessarily confused. They were just inept because there was nothing to be confused about. Tampa Bay didn't have to bring extra horses, and when they did, it caught Mahomes by surprise. When they did, it was on 3rd and 8s with Tyreek Hill out of the man-to-man situation. The Chiefs didn't have a prayer. I mean, Todd Bowles' fingerprints were all over this game plan, all over it. And he has great chess pieces. He has a great unit, no doubt about it. Great players. Sue still going strong. I think Ndamukong Suh is going to get a call, not only from the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but from the Nick Switala Hall of Fame, where the room is shrunk. That's how big time of a player Suh has been just year after year. And now he has a championship next to his name. It's going to be hard to ignore. Hill, again, you could look at the numbers all you want. Some of it was garbage time. He was out of the game. Tyreek Hill was taken out of the game. Kelsey, you could look at 10 for 133 all you want. Kelsey didn't get involved in the game until the second quarter. And by the way, by the time the second quarter came around, all momentum was with Tampa Bay. So as far as I'm concerned, they kept Kelsey in check despite the, big catches against the prevent defense, down 3 scores late. No TDs for Mahomes. He spent more time running around in the backfield than he did completing passes and running ahead of the line of scrimmage. I think I saw a stat. 497 yards Mahomes ran running around in the backfield. That's all you need to know. No right tackle, no left tackle. You're bringing in a guy that was just benched 5 weeks ago. I mean, how are you going to win? It's building through the line. It's having a line. And due to the circumstances, the Chiefs didn't have a prayer. And on the flip side, look at the Bucs O-line. I mean, trading up to get Wirfs at 13, just one spot. They knew how special Wirfs could be. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traded up one lousy spot. So, Gettleman takes the kid out of Georgia who looks mediocre. Becton looks like a star for the Jets. Lots of good offensive linemen from that draft. Wirfs might be the best one. Tampa Bay got him at 13. They get the linebacker at 45. They get the receiver Johnson outside of the top 100. They just take Devin White at pick 5 the year before. There's your team. And in that game, Bowles dominated Reed. Dominated. And we can stop pretending that Todd Bowles got stiffed from a head coaching job. We can do that right now because, as I've said leading up to today, and I'll say it again, Brian Daboll was the best candidate on the market. Brian Daboll turned Josh Allen into a superstar. Brian Daboll has worked under Saban. Brian Daboll has worked under Belichick. Brian Daboll just took that offense to championship Sunday and will probably take him to Super Bowl Sunday, or very well could take the next step and take them to Super Bowl Sunday next year. Brian Daboll didn't get a job in this coaching carousel. And I know the Lions chose not to interview Bowles. Look, not taking the Lions job was probably the best for Bowles. But other than that, you're not going to find me an example where Bowles got stiffed because he didn't. Todd Bowles looks ready for another opportunity. I think he's going to get another opportunity. I think it happens around this time next year. And whether or not he's going to learn from New York, I don't know. He knows the players. He knows the plays. He knows, he has the relationships. He's a player's coach. People love him. People respect him. People think he's a wizard. Only problem with Todd Bowles is what I just mentioned. And that is he does not know how to manage a game. Does that change for some? It sure does. Does it for others? It doesn't. It never changed for Jim Caldwell, but it changed for, and Pete Carroll is a little tacky in game management anyway. We all know that. Whether it's a Super Bowl incident or regular seasons, we get it. But Pete Carroll learned. Bill Belichick learned. You can learn. And I think you still have to acknowledge he deserves another opportunity, but we can stop pretending he got stiffed because he didn't. Let's just take it easy now. Hires aren't conducted after Super Bowl Sunday, They're not. If they were, maybe he'd get a job. But all 7 jobs have been filled, so we can put that to rest right now. You knew it was coming with Bowles. You knew it was coming. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think he is ready, and I think he'll get another spot. And I think his fingerprints are all over that win, and he gets the game ball, not only for yesterday, but really the entire postseason, no matter what they tell you about Brady. And that's item number 3. Here we go with Tom Brady. Tom Brady himself beat Breeze. Tom Brady himself beat Rodgers. Tom Brady himself beat Mahomes. And Tom Brady himself wins Super Bowl number 7. It's just not accurate. And look, we saw this after the Saint game. We saw this after the Packer game. This isn't news about giving Brady a little too much credit. And good for Brady. Yesterday, he played well. He really did. Tom Brady knew what he had to do, and damn it, he did just that. I'm not going to sit here and try to rip Tom Brady. I'm not. But the bottom line is the media narrative on this guy just isn't true. Todd Bowles and that defense won every playoff game. Every one. You want to make an argument about giving up 300 yards to Heineke? Okay. Unfamiliar, but I digress. Todd Bowles is responsible for every single playoff win. Todd Bowles is the MVP. Todd Bowles gets the game ball. And here we are talking about Tom Brady not only being responsible solely for beating all these MVP quarterbacks, and it's a hell of a milestone and accomplishment, please, but come on now. But here's Adam Schefter. First tweet I see of the day at 8 a.m. on a Monday after the Super Bowl, Adam Schefter basically calling out every team in the league last March for not going after Tom Brady. There were 10 teams last year that changed quarterbacks. One of those teams would have had a prayer with Brady. That team, the Indianapolis Colts. It's the only one. It had to be the perfect spot. Brady went to a spot where he had players. He did it. And look, Brady did a hell of a job coaching the team. You think that was Arians' offense? At latter part of the year in the playoffs, it wasn't. It was Brady. So I believe in the Tom Brady effect from that standpoint. But to act like Tom Brady's play rose above the defense's play, it's just not true. It's just not true. And as far as him winning the MVP, that shouldn't have been the case either. I would have been okay with Gronkowski, but I thought the award should have went to Devin White, best player on the field. But here are the Bucs. They were 7-5. The defense looked like doo. Brady looked like doo. And there they go. Just like we all thought. Beat Breeze, beat Rodgers, beat Mahomes. Chiefs don't have a left tackle. They don't have a right tackle. Brady gets every call and he wins the Super Bowl again. Brady gets every call. Brady gets every break. He wins the Super Bowl again. Is anyone else getting a little bit tired of it? You can acknowledge the greatness. And I'm not going to go put him number 1 on this big list, but he is in a little category. He's in a conversation with Gretzky, with Jordan, with Federer, with Babe Ruth. He's right there. But when you continue to read and watch this narrative about Tom Brady and about how much he is responsible and how dare the Chicago Bears not go for Tom Brady last year? How dare the Lions not bring Brady in over Stafford? How dare the Patriots not keep Tom Brady, who was on a $41 million cap hit on a team with no players? On a team with opt-outs. On a team that was playing in a division with a growing Bills team, a growing Dolphins team, a team that needs to rebuild. Shame on the Pats for not keeping Tom Brady. The people that just think that are clueless. Adam Schefter is more into the league than anybody on earth. But Adam Schefter, about Tom Brady, with that asinine tweet, and it's erroneous is what it is. It's just erroneous. Because it needed to be the perfect spot. And where I was wrong, the Bucs built a winner. Light built a winner. Not only with Wirfs, not only with the linebacker at 45, not only with Johnson, not only with the BGSU product, Scotty Miller, but by acquiring Brown and Fournette, he did it all. Brady did his thing, and Bowles was a wizard, and now the Buccaneers are COVID Super Bowl champs. And while the credibility of the game was dinged, little fluky at the end, You can't take it away. You're listening to Nick Switala on the Great Fox Sports Toledo, and this is the Green Light Special. We're coming right back with the Tony Romo discussion. Another disappointment from last night's dud of a Super Bowl 55. At the Switty Show on Twitter, feel free to partake in the sports talk conversation as we make our return on the Green Light Special.